And welcome back to Let's Play Skyrim Perfectly Modded, episode 16. If I can smack someone in the back with this, although I doubt.
Never should have come here.
Care to explain why? Figured out why. Jeez! Oh yeah, the... Oh, off with his head. Oh, and you want a shield? Oh my god. Yeah, these are definitely bandits. Ow! I love my axe. Just chop through everything. And then next. Alright. That was successful. And I didn't actually have to throw all my stuff to the ground. Darkest Darkness by Anonymous. In Morrowind, both worshippers and sorcerers summon lesser Daedra and bound Daedra as servants and instruments. Most Daedric servants can be summoned by sorcerers only for very brief periods within the most fragile and tenuous frameworks of command and binding. So fortune limits their capacity for mischief, though in only a few minutes, most of these servants can do terrible harm to the summoner as well as their enemies. Users may bind other Daedric servants to the plane through rituals and pacts. Such arrangements will allow the Daedric remaining on this plane indefinitely, or at least until their bodily manifestation in this plane is destroyed, precipitating the supernatural essences back to oblivion. Daedra encounter at Daedric ruins or in tombs, they are almost invariably long-term visitors to our plane. Likewise, lesser entities bound by the Daedra lords and to weapons and armor may be summoned for brief periods or may persist indefinitely as long as they are not destroyed and banished. Class of bound weapons and bound armor summoned by temple followers and conjurers are examples of short-term bindings. Here are artifacts like Mehrunes Razor and the massive Clavicus Vial, example of long-term bindings. The Tribunal Temple of Morrowind has incorporated the veneration of Daedra as lesser spirits, subservient to the immortal Alzmizvi, the Triune Godhead of Almixia, Solsil, and Vivek. Subordinate Daedra are divided into the good Daedra and the bad Daedra. The good Daedra are willing to submit to the authority of Alzmizvi. Daedra rebels who defy Alzmizvi, treacherous kin who are more often adversaries than allies. Daedra are Boethia, Azura, and Mefla. Hunger is a powerful and violent lesser Daedra associated with Boethia, father of plots. A sinuous, long-limbed, long-tailed, with a beast-skulled head, for its paralyzing touch and its ability to disintegrate weapons and armor. Winged Twilight is a Mizura of Azura, goddess of dusk and dawn. Winged Twilights resemble the feral harpies of the west, although the feminine aspects of the Winged Twilights more ravishing, their long, sharp, hooked tails immeasurably more deadly. Spider Daedra are the servants of Mephala, taking the form of spider humanoid centaurs with naked upper head, torso, and arms of human proportions, and on the 8 legs and armored carapace of a giant spider. Much of these Daedra are so fierce and rational that they can be trusted to heed the commands of the Spinner. Once a few sources are willing to either summon or bind such creatures in Morrowind. Daedra are Mehrunes Dagon, Malakoth, Sheogorath, and Molag The lesser Daedra associated with Mehrunes Dagon, the Agile and Pesky, Scamp, the ferocious and beast-like clan in fear, and the noble and deadly Drimor. Crocodile-headed humanoid Daedra called Daedroth, servant of Molag while the giant but dim-witted Algrim is a servant of Malakoth. Sheogorath's lesser Daedra, the Golden Saint, a half-clothed human female in appearance, is highly resistant to magic and a dangerous spellcaster. The type of lesser Daedra often encountered in Morrowind is Atronach, or Elemental Daedra. Atronachs have no binding kinship or alignments with Daedra lords, being one realm or another at whim, shifting sides according to seduction, compulsion, or opportunity. Brief History of the Empire, version 3. Thankfully, these aren't super long. By Stronark, K. Joel III, Imperial historian. In this volume, the series told in brief the story of the succession of the first 8 emperors of the Septim dynasty, Tyre I to Kinthria II. Oh, we talked about the first one, or maybe the second. When described the War of the Red Diamond and the 6 emperors, followed as Admiras from Ural III to Casimir I. In the volume is described how the Emperor Casimir, brother Ural IV, assumed the throne of the Empire of Tamriel. He recorded that Ural IV was not son by birth. His mother, though she resigned as empress for many years, reign was a dark elf married to true Septim Emperor Pelagius III. It was actually Caesarius one's cornsword after Pelagius' death. A nobleman named Gelvir Lyria. Before taking the throne of the Emperor, Caesarius I had ruled the kingdom of Wayrus. Poor health had forced him to retire. Caesarius had no children. He legally adopted his half-brother Uriel and abdicated the kingdom. Years later, Caesarius inherited the empire at the death of his mother. 3 years after that, Uriel once again found himself the recipient of Caesarius' inheritance. Uriel IV's reign was a long and difficult one. Despite being a legally adopted member of the Septim family, despite the Lariat family's high position, indeed they were distant cousins of the Septims, the Elder Council could be persuaded to accept him fully as a blood descendant of Tiber. The council had assumed much responsibility during Caesarius' long reign, and Caesarius I's short one, and a strong-willed alien monarch like Uriel IV found it impossible to command their unswerving fealty. Time and again, the council and emperor were at odds, and time and again, the council won the battles. So, days of Pelagius II, the Elder Council consisted of wealthiest men and women in the empire. Power they wielded was conclusive. And the council's last victory over Uriel IV was posthumous. And the rock Uriel IV's son was disinherited by the vote of council, and a cousin more closely related to the original Septim line was proclaimed Zyphreium II in the Third Era 247. For 9 years in Zyphreium II's reign, those loyal to Andorok battled the Imperial forces in an act that the sage Arian called Temper Septim's heart beating no more. Council granted Andorok the High Rock Kingdom of Shornhelm to end the war, and the Andoraks ascended to still rule there. By and large, Zyphreium II had foes that demanded more of his attention than Andorok. Out of a Cimmerian nightmare, in the words of Arentine, a man who called himself a Camoran usurper led an army of Daedra and undead warriors on a rampage through Valenwood. Having kingdom after kingdom, few could resist his onslaughts, and as months turned to bloody month in the year Third Era 249, even fewer tried. The second sent more and more mercenaries into Hammerfell to stop the usurpers' northward march, but they were bribed with slaughter and raised undead. The Cameron usurper deserves a book of its own. It is recommended that the reader find Palax or the Fall several for more details. Short over the section of the forces in the Super had little to do with it. Okay, we're almost done. Efforts of the Emperor. The result was a great regional victory and increasing hostility towards the seemingly inefficacious empire. Uriel V, Zyphreius' second son, Caesarius swiveled dominion back toward the latent power of the empire. In attention of Tamriel away from internal strife, Uriel V embarked on a series of invasions, and almost at the moment he took the throne in Third Era 268. Uriel V conquered Roscrea in 271, Ceci in 276, Vanessa in 279, and Estroniet 284. In Third Era 288, he embarked on his most ambitious enterprise, the invasion of the continent kingdom of Akavar. This only proved a failure. For 2 years later, Uriel V was killed in Akavar on the battlefield of Lanieth and never left. Five holds a reputation second only to Tiber as one of the two great warrior emperors of Tamriel. The last four emperors, beginning with Uriel V's infant son, and the fourth and final volume of this series. The City of Stone. Sellsword's Guide to Markarth by Amenela Alea Mercenary. If you're cutting your coins across Skyrim, you'll want to point your blade towards Markarth, the capital city of the Reach. No end of trouble in the City of Stone, and the million ways for you to earn your supper. Sellsword instincts should point you towards the wealthiest patrons, the fattest purses to work for. But you need to mind yourself during your resting hours. Markarth isn't like your Whiterun. Mercenary companies like the Companions makes a sellsword an honor profession. No, Mark has his own rules that knaves aren't going to just tell you. Few old Miss Alea is here to shine the torchlight over your thick skulls. First thing you notice in City Stone is the stone. They say dwarves cut out the city from the mountain. Maybe they did by the look of it, but what it really means is the whole place is vertical. Cities are really cliffs. Streets are really cliffs. So in short, be careful when you've got a belly full of mead. When you enter the city proper, you'll immediately hit the market. The merchants, she's a fool in Julian. Streets meat is the preferred ration. Carry rocks in there make for 4 farming land, and silver is what it's used to make most of all the rings and necklaces you might buy. Thanks to the large shield mine in the city. We'll get to that in a bit. When you do, don't ask the Markarth City Guard about anything. They're about as helpful as an angry frostbite spider while you're caught in its web. Mention anything about the Forsworn to them, they might spit in your eye. In Forsworn, these wild men and women will be your main source of income while you're in Markarth. Almost always is batting some Forsworn leader or another, and if you don't mind a blade to axe with someone 2 seconds short of a pint of ale, it's steady work. Silver Blood Inn is where you want to head into after seeing the market. Things are as usual watered down, and judging by the metallic taste, the water from the water runs through the city's smelter district. What's important here is getting a room to stay, and you won't find any friendly face to con your way into a cheap place to stay in Markarth. You don't trust strangers, so save yourself the trouble and put down your coin to rent a real room. After you spend a day recovering from travel, you'll see the Markarth side on two sides by the big crack in the center. Where the big river running through is called the riverside, and the other is called the dry side. That's where the smelter and native workers live, so don't bother going there. Instead, head directly to the dry side and talk to the local Nord nobles. No problems you can start solving at the highest rate. Major places to see are the Temple of Debilla and Sidona Mine. The temple rests on the top of the central crag. Place to go if you're on good terms with the divines, but be warned the priestesses of Debilla don't allow men into their inner sanctums. No crashing down and they're invited unless you want a short trip to a long fall. Sedona Mine is a place where all the silver comes from that I mentioned before, but it's also the jail. He uses prisoners to mine the ore, and that's a lot of it. Get caught doing something illegal in the city, to be hauled down there to the gate. Apparently, the whole place is owned by one of the big families in the city. Silverbloods, and inn is named after them. Always keep your sword eye open for hints like that. I tried meeting with the head Silverblood family to see if they had any work, but guarding their mine isn't the blood rush I became a mercenary for. Something to keep in mind if you're thinking of staying a few months. The place I'll talk about is Undersun Keep, the home of Jarl and Markov. Fancy palace, like any other, assuming your palace is built underground. What you need to know is the city underneath the keep. So right, there's another city below Markov, one of the old dwarven ruins. They sometimes have expeditions in ruins that make for a good job. And scholars that may be listing a few stones here and there. If you're lucky, you might come across some of the old dwarven machines. You can bring back a souvenir after you're done breaking it apart. Alright, Miss Olia's hand is getting tired, and that means this guide is done. Last piece of advice: don't cause trouble in Markov, don't start fights, don't stop fights. If you head anywhere where there's someone from the city paying you for it, believe me, no one in the Markov wants you there. Make your gold, drink your mead, see what's there, see and move on. Nothing changes the city stone, and that's just fine. What disaster at Eonath? The Imperial Commission on the disaster of Eonath. Wait, isn't that where the guy died on the fields? Yes. Preparations. First plans for the invasion of Akavir were laid in 270s when he began the conquest of the small island kingdom lie between Tamriel and Akavir. With the fall of Black Harbor in 282, if I was always looking at the ultimate prize, he immediately ordered extensive renovations to the port, which would serve as a marshalling point for the invasion force. As the main supply source throughout the campaign, at the time he began the construction of many large ocean-going transports, meaning for the final crossing to Akavir, in which the navy was previously deficient. Thus, it can be seen that the Emperor's preparations for the invasion were laid out well in advance before even the conquest of Estrella was completed, and was not a sudden win as some have charged. And Prince Brasarith yielded Astronaut to Imperial authority in 284. Full attention could be devoted to planning for the Akavari campaign. While expeditions were dispatched in 285 and 286 to scout the sea lanes, coastlines of Akavir, and the various Imperial intelligence agents, both magical and mundane, put together information. His information, the kingdom of the Sisaxi in southwest Africa was selected as the initial target for the invasion. The Emperor was gathering his expeditionary force. A new Far East fleet was created for the campaign, which for a time dwarfed the rest of the navy. Said to be the most powerful fleet ever assembled in the history of Tamriel. The 5th, 7th, 10th, and 14th Union were selected for the initial landing. 9th and 17th follows reinforcements once the beachhead was secured. There seemed to be a layman, a relatively small fraction of the army's total manpower. You remember that this expeditionary force would have to be maintained at the end of a long and tenuous supply line. In addition, the Emperor and the army command believed that the invasion would not be strongly opposed, at least at first. Most crucially, the Navy had only enough heavy transport capacity to move 4 legions at a time. We know here that the Commission does not find fault with the Emperor's preparations for the invasions. Based on information available prior to the invasion, which was obviously deficient in hindsight, great effort had made to accumulate, the mission believes the Empire did not act recklessly or imprudently. Some have argued that the Navy force was too small. Out on the country, even shipping could have been found to transport and supply more legions, possibly without crippling the trade of the entire empire. And this would have merely added to the scale of the disaster, would not have averted it. Could the rest of the empire be denuded of legions? The memory of the corpsmen was still fresh. The Emperor believed, and this commission agrees, that the security of the Empire precluded a larger concentration military force outside of Tamriel. If anything, the commission believes that the expedition force was too large. And the creation of 2 new legions during his reign and the recreation of the 5th, the loss of the expedition force left the Empire in a dangerous weak position relative to provinces, as the current situation makes all too clear. As the invasion of Akavir was beyond the current Empire's current strength, even the Emperor, who failed to maintain a larger force in Akavir, the Empire may have disintegrated behind him. Part 2, the invasion of Akavir. I really wish you gave me like a page number at the very bottom. Especially, no, we're not done yet. Invasion of Akavir. The expedition force left Black Harbor on 23rd Rain's hand. 288, and with fair weather landing in Aquiver after 6 weeks at sea. So it was a small, strategic port at the mouth of the large river, chosen for its proximity to Tamriel. It was located in a fertile river valley, giving easy access to the interior as well as good foraging for the army. All went well at first, so they had abandoned the town when the expeditionary force approached, took possession and renamed it Septimia. First colony of the Imperial Province of Aquiver, while the engineers fortified the town and expanded the port facilities, served the Far East Empire fleet, and were marched inland with 2 legions. The surrounding land was reported to be rich, well-watered fields. Meeting no resistance, the army took the next city upriver, also abandoned. So as we found it as Inioth, the Emperor established its headquarters there. Julian and Septon had better located to dominate the surrounding countryside. The force had yet to be any real resistance, so yeah, they're getting in so that they're being tricked. So they're being led into the city, and all that, and then they're going to get crushed. While the Legion were constantly shot by mounted enemy patrols, which prevented any but large scouting parties from leaving the main body of the army. Only the Emperor sorely lacked was cavalry due to limited space in the transport fleet, but for the time being, the battle mages made up for this with magical reconnaissance. Emperor now sent out envoys to try to contact the king or whoever ruled this land, but did never return. In retrospect, the mission believes the valuable time was wasted in this effort, while the Emperor was stalled at Aneth, which could have been better spent in advancing quickly, while the enemy was still apparently surprised by the invasion. We believed at the time that the city could be overawed, Emperor's power, and he might win the province by negotiation with no need for serious fighting. 4 legions were busy building a road between Septon and Iana, setting up fortified guard posts along the river, running both cities' defensive activities, which would serve them well later. The lack of cavalry scouting was limited, and communication between two city colonies threatened by enemy raiders, with which legions were still unable to come to grips. The plan had been to bring the 2 reinforced legions across as soon as the initial landing had secured a port, but the fateful decision was now taken to delay their arrival. They began using the fleet to transport colonists. The Emperor and the Council agreed that due to the complete abandonment of the conquered area by its native population, colonists were needed to work the fields so that the expeditionary force would not have to rely entirely on the fleet for supplies. In addition, unrest had broken out in Yelisia, asked what the supply route to Aquiver. I believe the 9th and 7th Legions better used to repacifying those territories and securing the expeditionary forces' supply lanes. The colonists and the supplies began arriving in Septon amid Hearthfire, and they took over their preparation in the fields, which had been started by legionnaires. For spring crop, a number of cavalry mounts were also brought over at this time. Raids on the 2 imperial colonies subsequently fell off. Sea emissaries so finally arrived in the isles were boarded to begin peace negotiating. The expeditionary force settled in what was expected to be a quiet winter. It's time the council urged the Emperor to return to Tamriel with a fleet to deal with the many pressing matters of the Empire. The army was in winter quarters, but the Emperor decided that it would be best to remain in Aquiver. Had to be fortunate because a large portion of the fleet, including the Emperor's flagship, was by an early winter storm during the homeward voyage. The winter storm season on 288 to 289 was unusually prolonged and exceptionally severe, and the fleet from return to Aquiver as planned. Initial supplies, this was awarded to the Emperor via battle mage, and it was agreed that the expeditionary force could survive on what supplies it had on hand till the spring. Part 3. Destruction of the expeditionary force. I guess not. The winter was also more severe than expected due to the supply problems and in addition to thousands of civilians. The expeditionary force was on tight rations. Man's worst auxiliary raised a return in force and inherited any foraging and scouting parties outside the walls of the 2 cities. Watch forts on the road between Septona and Elia were captured during blizzards, and the rest had to be abandoned as untenable. While the communication between the 2 cities had to be conducted entirely with magical means, and continued strain on the Legion's battle mages. On 5th Sun's dawn, a large entourage of Tessity arrived in Niles, claiming to bring a peace offers on the Tessity king. That night, these treacherous envoys murdered the guards at one of the city gates, and led in a strong party of their comrades who were waiting outside the wall of the city. The intention was to assassinate the Emperor, foiled only by the villagers' encouraged troopers of the 10th who were guarding his palace. When the alarm was raised, the civilians inside the city were hunted down and killed to the last man. Say this was the end of negotiations between the Emperor and the society. The arrival of spring only brought worse troubles. Instead of the expected spring rains, a hot, dry wind began to blow from the east, dealing with varying strength through the entire summer. Cross fell, and even the river, in the previous year, had been navigated by small boats for stream at Alliance, was completely dried up by sun's height. Unknown if this was due to a previously unknown weather pattern unique to Aquiver, or if they still manipulated the weather through magical means. It leans towards the former conclusion, as there is no direct evidence that assists the position such fearsome arcing power, but the latter possibility cannot be ruled out entirely. Due to the prolonged bad weather, the supply fleet was late in setting out from Barak Harbor and left port in the early second scene. Again, civilian balled by storms and limped in Septon 8 weeks later, much reduced. And increasingly desperate supplies situated in Aquiver. Emperor dispatched most of the battle mage corps with the fleet to assist weathering the storms which seemed like it to continue all summer. Sent the council urged the Emperor to abandon the invasion and to return to Tamriel with the expanded force. He again refused, knowing that the fleet was no longer large enough to transport all 4 legions at once. He reasoned that leaving 1 or more legion behind Akvar to await the return of the fleet would have damaged army morale. The mission also notes that the loss of 1 legion would have been preferable to the loss of the entire expeditionary force. It is unanimous opinion of the Commission that this was the last point to which complete disaster might have been averted. The decision was made to send the fleet reinforce supplies events to see to their inevitable conclusion. From this point on, not less is known about what transpired in Akavar. With most of the battle mages testing the fleet, communication between the expeditionary force and Tamriel was limited. The chance to which in Akavar worsened, the remaining battle mages had their power stretched to the limited, attending to all the needs of the Legion. However, it appears that the society may also have been interfering with the mages in some unknown manner. Some of the mages in Akavar reported their powers being abnormally weak. Neither the War College and the Citadel, who have been handling communication to the Council, problems linking up with their compatriots in Akavar, between master and pupil of long training. The Commission urges the War College to make a particularly study arcane powers of society should the Emperor ever come into conflict with Akavar again. As known is that the Emperor marched out of the Ionith. I don't know. Ionith. Maybe. Or Lonith. I don't know. Mid-sun's height, leaving only small garrisons to all the cities. He had learned that the city were amassing their forces on the side of the mountain range to the north. He intended to smash the army before he could gather full strength and capture the supplies, which he was in desperate need. Her advance seems to have taken the city by surprise, and the expeditionary force across the mountains found the camp, routing the army and capturing the leader, a noble of some kind. It was soon forced to retreat, and the legion suffered heavily on their retreat to Ionath. The Emperor now found himself besieging Ionath, cut off from the small garrisons of Septima, which was also besieged. By this time, it seemed the efforts of the few remaining battle mages were devoted entirely to creating water to keep the army alive, not normally emphasized at the War College. Fleet had arrived safely back to Black Harbor thanks to Battle Mage Corps, but all attempts to return to Akvar were frustrated by a series of even more savage storms. Yeah, I think it is, well, if they didn't know, I guess. Yeah, throughout the rest of 289. Sol's last contact with the Emperor was in early Frostfall. Oh, is that why the mods are named that? Eating Star of the Council was extremely worried about the Syrian Akvar and ordered the fleet to sail regardless of risk. Then continued to storm the fleet and managed to press on Akvar. The raised when contact was made with the Emperor's battle mage, who reported that Anos was still held out. They were quickly laid for the expeditionary force to break out of Ionis and fall back on Septima. They would meet them. This was the last direct contact with the expeditionary force. The fleet arrived in Septima to find its garrison on a savage toll. Large to the army, the battle mages with the fleet threw back the enemy long enough for the survivors to embark and the fleet to withdraw. The expeditionary force, who reached Septima, told how the Emperor had led the army out of Ionis. Oh, I keep on thinking it's almost done. Well, it is almost done. 2 days earlier, they started breaking through the enemy lines, but then being surrounded by overwhelming forces on the road to Septima. Told the heroic last stand by the Emperor and the 10th Legion, which allowed the remnant of the 14th to reach Septima. 2 leaders survived the 10th arrived in Septima that night, having slipped through the enemy lines during their unsplit victory celebration. Men confirmed having seen the Emperor die, cut down by enemy arrows as he rallied the 10th's shield wall. Part 4, conclusion. The Commission believes the invasion of Akvar was doomed from the start for several reasons, none of which could have been foreseen, unfortunately. He sends the gathering the expeditionary force was clearly unprepared for the region of Akvar. The unexpected weather, which plagued the army and navy, was particularly disastrous. Loss of a majority of the Far Fleet East Fleet during the campaign, the expeditionary force could have been withdrawn in 289. The weather also forced the Emperor to assign most of his battle mage corps to the fleet, even without their valuable assistance during the fighting, which would fall. Of course, unexpected drought, which struck Ionis during 289, chose to supply the army locally and left the expeditionary force in an untenable situation when besieging Ionis. The Society were also much stronger than the international reports suggested, and the size of the army they were eventually able to field against the expeditionary force is vague, as the only serious fighting took place after communication was cut off between the Emperor and the Council. Nevertheless, it seems likely that the Society and the forces by several times, as they were able to force 4 crack legions into retreat and then keep them under siege for several months. As was stated previously, the Commission declined to criticize the initial decision. However, based on what was known at the time, the plan seemed sound. It was only with the benefit of hindsight that it became obvious that the invasion had very little chance of success. Thus, the Commission believes several valuable lessons can be taken from this disaster. First, the Society may have extremely powerful arcane forces at command. Possibly that they may have manipulated the weather across such a vast region seems kind of incredible. Should we know that 3 commissioners strongly objected to this paragraph even being included in the report? But the Commission believes that this matter deserves urgent investigation. Potential danger is such that even the slightest possibility must be taken seriously. The necessity appears to possess no navy to speak of. The forest was never threatened by sea, and the Far East fleet fought nothing but the weather. Indeed, plans called for a portion of the fleet to remain active for use in coastal operations. It meant that there were very few places where the large vessels of the fleet could approach the land, due to numerous reefs, sandbars, islands, etc., infested the coastal waters north and south from Sepna. Due to the utter lack of trees in the plains around Sepna, the expeditionary force was unable to build smaller vessels which could be have navigated shallow coastal waters. Any future military expeditions against Akvar would do well to consider some way of bringing a means for inshore naval operations, in order to exploit the clear advantage over the necessity and advantage that was sadly unexploited by the expeditionary force. Third, much longer-term study needs to be made of Akvar before another invasion could even be contemplated. Finished together with the 4 years prior to the invasion were extensive but clearly inadequate. The expeditions were completely unexpected, much stronger than expected, and the attempt at negotiations Emperor was a necessity was a disaster. It proved alien beyond expectation, and the Commission believes any further attempt made at Akvar should not be contemplated without much greater knowledge of the conditions, politics, and peoples of the continent that I presently attained. Finally, Commissioner unanimously concludes that given what we know, I know any attempt to invade Akvar is folly, the least present state of the Empire. The Emperor's legion is needed at home. One day, his will unite Emperor will return to Akvar and exact severe retribution for disaster in us for a fallen Emperor. But that day is not now, nor in the foreseeable future. Mixed unit tactics. How long is this? Not too long, because I'm actually way quite a bit over time. Unit Tactics of the 5 Years' War, Volume 1 by Codus Calnus. The legions could learn from the unconventional tactics used by the Khajiit in the 5 Years' War against Valenwood. I was stationed in the Sphinx Moth Legion for the border near Dune and witnessed many of the northern skirmishes firsthand. War started with the so-called slaughter of the Torval. The Khajiit claimed that the Bosman invaded the city without provocation, killed over thousands of citizens before being driven off with forces from a nearby jungle tribe. Claiming that attack was in retaliation for Khajiit bandits that were attacking wood caravans headed for Valenwood. In the spring of 3rd Age 396, a war moved closer to the fort. Sphinxmoth was posted on lookout. Parts of conflict I later spoke with both Khajiit and Bosmer who fought in the battle, and it will serve as an excellent example how the Khajiit used a mixture of ground and tree units to win the war. He began fighting in the usual way by sending tree-cutting teams of Calthe, fearsome Senshrath or battle cats, into the outskirts of Valenwood's forest. When we reached the Bosmer that the trees were being felled, allegedly a crime in the strange Bosmer religion. Archers were dispatched from larger conflicts in the south. Bosmer were thus goaded into splitting the force into smaller groups. Archers took up the position in the remaining trees whose branches were now 20 or more feet apart, allowing some light into the forest floor. Bosmer bent the remaining trees with the magics into small fortifications from which they fired their bows. Tree cutters arrived the next morning. Half a dozen Khajiit fell to the Bosmer arrows in the first volley. Khajiit took large wooden shields from the backs of the Senshrath and made a crude shelter. The Khajiit, even the enormous Senshrath, able to hide behind the shelter in one of the large trees. And apparent that the Khajiit would not leave the shelter, some Bosmer chose to descend and engage the Khajiit sword to claw. Mother nearly upon the shelter, one of the Khajiit, and playing out an instrument plucked men of bars. This was a signal of some kind. A whole group of men like Alms and Alms Rot emerged from the covered holes of the forest floor. That number, they were attacking from behind by surprising them on the ground quickly. Archers in the trees would have won the battle were they not having trouble with their own. Dagi and Dagi Rot, two of the less common forms of Khajiit who live in the trees of the Tenwar forest, jumped from one tree to another under magical cover of silence. They took up a position in the higher branches that could not hold a Bosmer's weight. When the signal came, they used their claws and either torches or spells of fire. The two survivors I spoke with vary on this point. Struck the archers while the battle on the ground took place. A few of the archers would flee, but most were killed. Apparently, the Dagi and Dagi Rat had more magical abilities than is widely believed. They were able to keep themselves magically silenced for so long. So Mosman told me that he saw a few ordinary cats among the Dagi, and even claimed that these ordinary cats are known as Alfik, and that they were spellcasters. Those are almost as unreliable as a Khajiit when it comes to truth. I believe that a house cat can cast spells. In that day, the Khajiit lost perhaps a half dozen fighters out of a force of no more than 4 dozen. And the last nearly entire company of archers, able to report back before a second company of archers arrived, and the strategy was repeated again with similar results. Stronger force was sent, and the Bosman won that battle with the help of the native animals of the Valenwood. The third skirmish in the Khajiit response I will discuss in the second volume of the series. Okay. Let's save before we get any problems. But anyways, I find it weird that quick saving takes way longer than normal saving. And that's going to be for this episode though, so if you enjoyed the video, you know what to do. See ya!